next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about something that's very interesting as well. We're going to talk about the issue, he's going to speak on the issue of wealth. Wealth. Now, one of the things that we know about Solomon is that Solomon had a very good perspective on the whole issue of wealth. Now, why do we know that he had a good perspective on the whole that has ever lived? He's going to talk a little bit about wealth. He's going to give us a little insight on wealth and see if we can get a little glimpse into the whole idea of how Solomon played into the picture of wealth. Verse 5. Someone read that for us.
Better not to vow and not.
I'm sorry, verse 6. I'm sorry.
Do not let your mouth cause your flesh to sin, nor say before the messenger of God that it was an error. Why should God be angry and your excuse and destroy the works of your hand?
Okay. Let's look at verse 6. He says, does not cause your mouth. Again, he's on the subject of making vows, being complete with our vows, saying what we're going to say, and what it is that you produce for God, or say that you're going to, let it be true, rather than you, of course, making up some words that you can't fulfill. In other words, you writing checks you can't cash. That's basically what he's saying. Think about what you're saying. Think about what you're doing. Verse 8. We're going to skip down verse 7, verse 6, and let's go to verse 8. We're going to talk about another subject. This subject he's going to talk about is the issue of corruption. And he's going to talk about the issue of wealth as it relates to money and government. Solomon has a very interesting issue that he seems to be very concerned with. And one of the issues he's very concerned with is the issue of how power, wealth, and the poor come together. Power, wealth, and the poor come together. And he sees this as it relates to something called government. We're going to talk a little bit about this. And Solomon sees a very interesting subject of the issue of government and government corruption. When we think about the government, often we think of a scale like the President of the United States. We say, hey, the President is doing this, the President is doing that. Really, government is more local for the average person. Really, if you want to see some government changes, the President of the United States it's not going to do a whole lot to affect your life personally. What you really are looking at is local level. And Solomon saw government on a broad level, he also saw government on a local level. And we're going to see what his perspective is on government. His perspective is on government. What does he see in verses 8?
If you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in a providence, do not marvel at the matter.
Okay.
For high official watches over high official, and a higher officials are over them.
Verse 8 is a very interesting verse. Solomon says in verse 8 not to be surprised that the government is corrupt. Not to be surprised that the government is corrupt. In fact, he says if you see an official who is over a system of injustice, whether they're extorting the poor, or they're taking advantage of people, or they're not doing what they do, don't be surprised that it's probably over him that is also connected to the vast corruption. You know, a lot of times when we think of a government, we think of government people who are elected that are going to help people. But really, the rich are designed to help the rich. The poor get poor, and the rich get richer. And the government is really connected look at the upper levels of government, they really are connected to major corporations. They're not necessarily connected to the average guy that's on the street. It's not about the guy who is Joe Blow, who is taking care of his family. The government is not designed at that level. The government is designed at a much corporately large level. They're into helping big companies. They're into helping gigantic corporations. They are looking at helping the rich. Think about the crash in the United States, the great economic crash that happened in 2008, 2009. And when they bailed out the economy, they didn't bail out the people. They bailed out the banks. They gave money to the banks. They gave money to Wall Street. And so the rich really, in many ways, looked out for the rich, and the government looked out for the rich. Because the government really is a system of people who help major big people. And the average little person, they don't help. But Solomon says that he's noticed that. It's not something that's noticeable. That's not noticeable. It is something that he sees over and over and over again. The corruption of the rich over the poor. The justice. The corruption of someone who is taking advantage of other people. So when we look at corruption, it is not something that is Solomon has noticed. What he says that should happen, verse 9, he says in what?
Moreover,
Go ahead.
moreover, the property of the man is for all, even the king is served from the field.
Okay, so Solomon said that a great way to look at this would be the king or the leader should see that the population of people should benefit the entire region of the country, that the king should be a person that sees the aspect of everyone having a part in growing and having a happy or having a part in being enjoying part of the wealth is something that would benefit the entire land. If the king, that's what it says, is the king is cultivating fields. The king is making sure that everything is fair. This should be the job of the king. This should be the job of the leader. But we see that today Solomon recognizes that that's not the case. The rich are getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And he says, one of the things he wants to point out, that the issue of wealth per se won't bring you the satisfaction that you think it's going to bring you. Look at what it says in verse 10. He says what?
He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity.
Okay? So he's saying money will what? It won't bring you happiness. Now, he's going to give you the reason why money won't bring you happiness. He says if you are what? Love silver or you love money, you're not going to be satisfied with loving your income. Well, why is that the case, Solomon? Verse 11.
When good increase, they keep them. So what profit have the owner except to see them with their eyes?
So verse 11 says, what the gaining of wealth leads to is the desire to get more wealth. You would think that the gaining of wealth would lead to satisfaction. You would think the gaining of wealth would lead to happiness. But really it leads to a pursuit to get more wealth. This is what it leads to. When someone, their prosperity increases, the aspect of wanting to consume increases. People on the outside and you as well. The more stuff you have, the more stuff you want to get, the more money you spend, the more money you feel that you need. You begin to have a greater desire to get more and more and more. And you even begin to move into the realm where you want to protect what it is that you have. You get to the point where you're thinking that if I can protect it. And this obsession with wealth leads one to become very anxious, very unsatisfied. To the point that it says in verse 12, what?
The sleep of a laboring man is sweat, whether he eat little or much. But the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep.
So he's saying that a person who is wealthy, in verse 12, it says The person who is the laborer or the average working Joe, that person is able to sleep well. A lot of things are not on his mind. He's not worried about his stocks, he's not wealth, he's not worried about his materialism. This kind of thing draws into his mind that the abundance and the having of things doesn't bother him at all because he's having things. But the person who is wealthy, they're always worried about what? Their things. Things are on their mind. How am I going to protect my wealth? You know, I have money and then I have to find out who's going to watch over my money, who's keeping the money, who's not stealing from me, what are my accountants doing, what are my lawyers doing. It kind of brings that they don't have the peace that they need. You would think that, well, if you have all this money, you'd have peace. If you have all this money, you'd have happiness. If you have all this money, you'd have some sense of comfort. But Solomon seems to see the aspect of having more wealth brings more anxiety. He then wants to move this into the realm that this wealth brings with it things. This wealth brings with it things are materialism. And he sees materialism as, in the next few verses, as being a hindrance to one's life. You know, one of the things we think of materialism, we think of materialism as just wealthy people having materialism. But materialism involves anything that people are holding on to that they think is going to bring them some form of security in life to the point that they can't move forward. They can't think, they can't do anything. They can't really move forward to even moving around the materialism because the materialism kind of traps them. And he gives you an example of this in verse 13. What does he say? So read for us verse 13. Verse 13 says what?
There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their own to his hurt.
Okay. Riches are wealth that is hurted. You know, they get all this money, it actually moves to bring misery to them. It doesn't bring happiness to them. You would think it would bring happiness. You think, hey, if I get more stuff, I have a more comfortable car, I have a more comfortable house. In fact, it says it brings misery to them. Now, Solomon has observed that this misery that this wealth brings to them continues on in their mind and in their life. In their mind and in their life. Look what it says in verse 14.
But those riches perish through misfortune. When he beget a son, there is nothing in his hand.
Okay, so the wealth that a person gets are all of these things that they acquire in life can wealth. What can happen to that person is they can then lose it. This brings a great deal of anxiety. They acquire all this wealth and they lose all this wealth. You know, a lot of times with a celebrity or athlete, they have all this wealth, they acquire a lot of stuff, they get all this money and things, and then they lose it within a few years. So anything can happen with a great misfortune, and the person can lose a great deal of wealth. And it says what? That person has then nothing to leave to their offspring or their children. And this is what a lot of people assume. They say, hey, I'm acquiring things, and once I acquire things, I'm going to leave them to my children. That's kind of a mindset that of wealth. When I get this wealth and I acquire this stuff, I'm going to leave it to somebody. And actually the wealth in fact, it kind of hinders them. They can't do anything. I have a neighbor who has a lot of money, and he actually is sick. He wants to move overseas, and his health will not allow him to go overseas. In reality, even though he has the money to get overseas, his health, he has his mindset that he's going to live overseas. Even though he has all this money, it's nothing that he can do. And one of the things that he's trapped with all these things that he has. He's saying, when I get everything together out of my house, I'm trying to get things together. And he's been trying to get things together for the last 2 years. He's been trying to get his house together and trying to get clothes and all this stuff for 2 years. He really is trapped in his life. He doesn't have his health is not able, he's not healthy enough to his house and get things together. Even though he has the money, and he has too much anxiety to get rid of it. So he doesn't know what to do. He is trapped. So his wealth or his things have trapped him. In a position where a person says, here's the wealth that they think they're going to acquire and pass on to their children, it's lost. And Solomon says, the reason why it's lost is very simple. Verse 15, he says, what?
Go on.
Verse 15.
As he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return, to go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his.
So Solomon seems to bring the reality to this idea of things and wealth is that one has to have another mentality, and the mentality has to be that you are not going to take anything with you when you die. You're actually going to leave it all behind. You know, people are struggling and they're worried about. You see that on the news. People planning for quote unquote retirement. You know, they're going to plan. You know, you listen to the news, they tell you that you never have enough money to retire, and so people assume that they're going to have enough. They're going to retire. You know, when I get 65, 70, whatever. I'm going to retire, and I'm going to save enough money to retire. And you hear that all the time. People get to the age of retirement, and they saved all this money, and then what? They die. Because you don't know when you're going to die. You just assume, like, I'm going to die when I'm in my 70s or 80s or 90s or whatever. But it doesn't always work out that way. And so, worrying about what you have and what you're going to take with you, it's really futile, Solomon says, because when you die, you can't take it with you anyway. You just move on to the next life, and there's nothing that you can hold on your hand that you're going to transfer or anything else. You're actually going to leave it all behind. So the best way to look at it is begin to detach yourself from this materialism, because what it draws you into, it actually draws you into a kind of misfortune. In verse 16 it says what?
And this also is a severe evil. Just exactly as he came, so shall he go. And what profit has he who has labored for the wind?
You're laboring for the wind. You're laboring for nothing. You're moving in your life. He says, what profit are you going to have? You're not going to have any profit. It's actually is a form of evil. It's a misfortune that you're working to acquire things, and there's nothing that you can do with these things. You know, a lot of things people are now trying to do as they get older. I see people now living a minimalist lifestyle. You know, when I get to people in retirement homes, you see people say, you know what, I just decided I'm going to downsize. I'm moving into an apartment. I'm getting rid of all this stuff. I'm selling a lot of stuff, and I'm downsizing. I'm coming to the reality that I can't keep up with all this stuff, so I'm downsizing, getting rid of all these things. And Solomon says the exact same thing. He says the acquisition of these things is toiling in the wind. You're wasting your time because you're eventually going to die and to leave it. In fact, what happens to you, he gives a very interesting, in verse 17, he says what?
All his days he also eats in darkness, and he has much sorrow and sickness and anger.
Okay. That's a very interesting thing. It's eating in darkness. What do you think that means, eating in darkness? Yeah, you're eating in misery. You're not eating in the light of enjoyment. You're eating in the darkness of misery. You're living in the darkness of misery. You're living away from being able to see the light of enjoyment. That's basically what he's saying. You can't see the light of enjoyment because you're in the darkness eating. But instead, he draws a bigger picture and says, how are we to see the things that we have? How are we to see the wealth that we have? So Solomon has now the perspective of life with things with God. Life with things with God. In other words, how are we to see our wealth? How are we to see the fruit of our labor? What does that look like? He wants to now to paint a bigger or a better picture with God. Verse 18, what does he say?
Here's what I've seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, for it is his heritage.
Okay? Now he says, what God really does is he brings the rewarding understanding that you are to enjoy and be of your life as you see the fruit of your life and enjoy it. And this is reward from God. God brings the reward of you enjoying what you have, that you enjoy. You're not anxious about your wealth and losing your wealth. God brings you the enjoyment of enjoying it for that moment. That's a reward. He brings a reward to the person and says, well, I'm not worried about, I'm not going to have enough money because my contentment is in God, and God brings me the enjoyment to enjoy it and to have the mindset to let that go. I no longer have the anxiety of holding on to things and holding on to wealth and holding on to something because that's my security. I now am able to freely let that go. I now am freely able to enjoy my wealth. I'm freely able to enjoy what it is I have. This is a reward from God. So God brings a reward to people. And that reward in people's life is being able to enjoy the fruit of your labor. Rather than your fruit of your labor having a hold or a stranglehold on you that you really can't enjoy. The things that you have become in reality for many people a burden. They were talking about this guy, Jerry Seinfeld, and he talks about how he started out collecting cars, and then he wanted to get more cars, so he bought a bigger garage, and he bought more cars, he got a bigger garage, and then more cars, and then the neighbors started complaining because there was too many garages, and then he had get permits for having all these cars. In other words, the more stuff he had, the more headache he had in acquiring more and more wealth. Being able just to enjoy a small and realize that no matter how much stuff you acquire, you ultimately leave it behind. God brings into the mind of the human heart the enjoyment of the reward of what it is that you have, that you can use these things and enjoy them and then be free to let them go. Be free to let them go. Be free to get rid of these things. Verse 19, he talks about that. Verse 19, what does he say?
As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God.
Okay, so God has given every man what? The wealth, the possessions, the ability to have these things. And the reward is God has given to you the ability to enjoy them. God has given you the ability to enjoy them. That's a reward from God. No matter how much you have, the contentment of enjoying what you have and being able to enjoy it is a gift from God. You have a few things, you're able to enjoy them and have a good time with them. That's a gift from God. It's better than having a lot of things and you can't enjoy them. It's better than having a lot of things and they begin to be a burden on you. It's better than having a lot of things and it becomes for you kind of an anchor that holds you down. So having God in your life, God brings a gift to you that as you begin to let go of the things, God says, I will begin to bring enjoyment to your life and the anxiety will begin to go away. You're not worried about it. You're not worried about what it is what's going to happen because God frees you and you're able to enjoy the wealth that you have. Verse 20.
For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart.
Okay, so here, this person is not worried about the aspect of their lives and, when am I going to die, or when, I don't know what's going to happen to me, if I'm going to get sick. God goes, he removes that from you. and you instead are able to enjoy the activity of your life without worrying about is tomorrow gonna be my last day? What's gonna happen to me when all what's gonna happen to all this stuff? He frees you. And you no longer are preoccupied about worrying about the future. The reward from God is that God brings the contentment and the peace in your life by having God in your life. And that really is the message of Christ. That He comes, He says, I come that they might have life, and that they might have life more abundantly. That they may truly understand the meaning of life. And the meaning of life is not found in things or the holding on to things. And it comes to the we must die and leave all of these things, all this wealth, all this stuff behind. It really is a form of idolatry. It's a form of idolatry just to hold on to all the things and possessions that we have, and not being able just to let them go and say, they're done. I'm free. I can enjoy life. This wealth, or these things, or these possessions, they're holding me back from the enjoyment of life, and I want to be able to enjoy life. God brings that reward to people's lives, that they're able to release the possessions that they have, and God is able to enable individuals to enjoy the life that they have without worrying about wanting to get more stuff, and without worrying about wanting to get more possessions. And you no longer are occupied about your life. If you're going to make it tomorrow, if you're going to make it the next day, He removes that from you. God brings the peace of life and the peace of what it means to live life, and to live life in contentment with what it is that you have. Well, next time we're going to go chapter 6. Sorry about the disruption. Those of you who are online, we had a little disruption. Problem there, but we're back on, and you can see the rest of it on our webpage and on our YouTube channel. Any questions? Any comments?
What's the consequences of making a vow and not being able to keep it? Are there any consequences to it?
Well, a lot of times we do make vows, and we can't always keep it. The issue is that God recognizes that. God hears our prayers all of the time. And the consequences is that it's not so much that something happens to us that's bad or good. That's not necessarily what it is. But the issue is that God wants us to not make vows. Because in reality, we can't keep them. We can't keep the vows. It isn't so much that God punishes us because we don't keep the vows. He already knows you're not going to keep it. He knows that you're making a vow to Him and you're not going to keep it. So the best way to do that and to end that is not to make any vows. And that way you can be sure of not breaking any vows with God. Let's pray. Father God, thank you, Lord, for your word. Thank you, Lord, for the power of your word. Pray that you continue to help us in the lives of believers. We pray for hearts to do all that we're going to do and to know all that we're going to do. Keep us in your care, and in Jesus' name we do.